Hi guys, greetings and welcome. My famous introduction on most of my vlogs. The reason I'm putting this vlog together is basically because my road shows, they're going down quite well, as I'm traveling throughout the country, but there's going to be some parts of the country I just won't be able to get to. So I thought I'll put this little video together, a little vlog, so that you can at least have an idea. If you can't make any of my road shows, you can actually see what I talk about on here. And anyway, I suppose most people ask me, what the introduction into groundbait. Well, I can honestly say that when I was young and we used to follow the international teams and in great interest, because it's always somebody's ambition. I suppose, like most match anglers, is to perhaps fish for their country one day, in the World Championships. Of course, in them days, it was float-only matches. Different today, of course, you've got all other types of, feeder matches and cart matches and so on. But in them days, going back 30, 40 years ago, it was one of the best highlights of the year, World Championships, and one of the greatest honours that, you could have in fishing for your country, in this great sport of ours. Anyway, as I said, when we first started fishing the World Championships, it was in 1982. That was when we got introduced to the World Championships, and we had a team selected from Wales, and we went along and we fished on the Welsh Raven at Luddington. Never forget, it was a great match. Huge amount of anglers turned up, and it was our first introduction, if you like, into continental fishing and in particular their ground baits. And anyway, on that particular occasion, we'd had gone there practicing, didn't know any different. All we done was loose feed, As most people know, the Welsh Raven is a flowing river, and so Wagner or stick float as far as we were concerned. Anyway, it ended up having our trial matches, and come the actual match itself, I'll never forget, I drew, I think it was an area called the Glory Hole, on the Welsh Raven, which is at Luddington near Manor Farm, I believe. Anyway, when I drew the peg, it was all roped off, and there was loads of anglers all watching us. And anyway, the anglers, both sides of me, I think it was a Portuguese guy one side, and I don't know, some Czechoslovakian or something above me. And anyway, when the World Championship starts, or before it starts, there's a 5-minute baiting up period. And of course, something we weren't prepared. Basically, the 5-minute baiting up period, all hell let loose. They were throwing balls of ground bait in like you wouldn't believe. Big balls like cannonballs. It was like disturbing the water in the river. Oh, it was terrible. I thought, what have they done? What are they doing? But we didn't realise, obviously, there's method in the madness there, because it's almost like a dinner bell, the bell goes and the fish know it's feeding time. But anyway, on that particular occasion, as I said, I drew up in C-section, and I just plodded away with, when the match started, as a gesture, I just threw a little pinch of maggots in and had a great applause from all the anglers, all the people watching. And anyway, it was my introduction into World International Championships. And history will tell you, if you look at the records, the Welsh team, we done tremendously well. We came third, all fishing wagglers and stick floats down the river, and catching little chubs and roach and things like that. However, the French team, they absolutely obliterated the match, and they won it with balling in, bloodworm and chokers. England, incidentally, didn't come anywhere that year, although they did have the individual winner with Dave Thomas on the second day when the water came in flood. and he managed to catch a few fish right at the beginning before it come up too high. But anyway, as I said, that was our introduction to ground bait. Yeah, so anyway, being new in the international scene, as I said, we've done exceptionally well, and bronze medal. By the way, just to let you know, I was third on the first day, £6 that I had, and I'll never forget, mind you. I've got to tell you this because it was almost like halfway through the match when I'm catching on a regular, every trot down is catching the odd chub, and in them days, well, still today, you can fish anywhere in your, zone, in your 15-meter zone. You can fish in the middle, the bottom, or the top. Of course, on the river, we all fished up the top, to get the most of our peg by trotting down. And that's what happened. And I was catching my fish right down the edge of my swim. Of course, the guy below me, seen I was catching, come up the top end of his swim, which is the bottom end of my swim, and started throwing balls of groundbait in, and that ruined it. I could have caught a few more if he hadn't done that. But anyway, never. I still beat him, and I just said, come third overall on that particular, on my introduction to the World Championships. But something that we did learn, as I said, about the ground bait. Now we thought, okay, we're new boys. We're gonna set the world alight. We thought. Little did we realise, over the next few years, going to the World Championships, we absolutely got obliterated. We never had a look in the Welsh team because we just weren't aware of this ground bait. And if people can remember back in the 1970s and 80s, I mean, all the ground bait that we could ever get in the UK was British breadcrumb, and that was it. Kestrel, and or baker's crumb from the local bakery, and that was about it. There was no continental ground baits around in them days, so we had a big learning curve. We had to learn. And over the preceding years, as I said, we fished in the World Championships and getting, battered every match, all because of, the balling in. And of course, most of the matches were fished with the pole, bloodworm, which is something new to us at the time. And so anyway, I made a conscious decision to try and, if you like, go and learn a little bit more about the ground bait and methods and secrets of ground bait, which leads me on to the next part of the Roadshow, because on the Roadshow I explain how I got very friendly with Van der Nijnd, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. Great guy, Belgium. I think at the time they were probably one of the biggest ground bait companies in the world, and some of the bags found their way into the UK, but mainly abroad. When I used to meet up with Van der Nijnd, I'd have a chat with him and ask him about his secrets and that. And he I was privileged to tell me a few things. Told me that they use a lot of sweet ground bait. In fact, his factory was very close to a coconut manufacturing or coconut plant, and he used to get all the husks from the coconuts, and he used to mix that with his ground bait. And lo and behold, that's why a lot of the Van der Nijnd ground baits are very sweet smelling. I assume, Brasem is one, for example, and they should do Lake and a few other sweet smelling ground baits. So that was that. And then another eye openers were the Dutch. I got very friendly with a lot of the Dutch teams, and in fact, when we went to Holland a couple of times fishing. We used to go along to the local tackle shops, and unlike the British tackle shops, their ground bait used to be able to buy them in, individual ingredients, and then what the local anglers would do would mix their own ground baits up, and there was always a secret. Always everyone had their little intricacy and little secrets, and they thought it would work. But one amazing thing that I did find out is the amount of salt they used to put in there. They used to put kilos and kilos, well, at least half of the ground bait would be made up of salt. And, when you consider like bream being their most popular species that they fish for, and they fish in brackish waters, these big canals, they're all sea-faring canals and quite brackish, to put salt in the ground bait, it was amazed how the fish, well, they just like salt. In fact, it's like a bit of a laxative, really, because it passes through them very quickly, you know. And that was one thing I learned about the brie mixes, which I talked about, you know, in my roadshow. Then I got very friendly with the French team. Now, the French team actually, I was sponsored by Water Queen, French company, and I actually went to France for, I think it was about a month, 4 weeks I was spent there, and I learned a lot. I'll tell you about that now. Yeah, so when I stayed with the French, they were very interesting lads. They used to explain how they used to, you know, scrape their own bloodworm, and how they used to shot up their floats in shot in tubes, you know, which is something that I think we do now a lot. The British anglers do, you know, and they put them on winders. And one thing I can say that they were so particular, the French, they would shot their float up on a winder, and then they would fish with it once, destroy it, and you know, make a new one for the following week. Of course, us British anglers, we don't do that, do we? We just keep on using the same rig every week in, week out, I think, sometimes. But anyway, what I learned off them was that, and this was very important, which I talk about on my roadshow, and that is that they used to use a lot of leam. Now, leam is like a clay, fine powdered clay, which you can excavate from the ground in a lot of these dry countries. Unlike our country, of course, our nearest ingredient, I suppose, or similar, it would be molehill or earth, you know, sieved molehill. But in France, they use this clay, and they call it leam, and they used to mix that with a lot of their ground baits. And this is the real secret, because by doing that, not only does it make the ground bait very pliable, and you can use the ground bait, you know, you can mix it in such a way that it can break up over a period of time, you know. I'm very impressed with that. You know, you can mix it in such a way that you can get it to break up over 5 minutes, half hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And so through experimenting that you can actually learn how to do that, you know, with the leam. But also, leam doesn't fill the fish up. You know, this is another thing. You know, ground bait attracts the fish into the swim, hence the name ground bait. But a lot of fish do eat the ground bait, and if they eat the ground bait, they're not going to eat your bait, are they? So by adding leam, less feed, more fish. You know, bigger bags of fish. And this is something I think the England team learned, and we started to learn it as well. Add leam, you know, to your ground baits. So that was one other thing. The Italians, they were very good as well. Now, they used, believe it or not, pasta, you know, ground pasta. And if you grind pasta up in your ground bait, you can make a very nice stiff mix. And when you consider some of the big, deep rivers they have, like the river Boulogne, is it? Or Bolognese, where the rods come from, Bolognese rods, and also the Arno and places like this. So yeah, this mix using pasta. As I said, I learned all this, the ingredients, I suppose, over the coming years, and lo and behold, we started to produce our own ground bait with British ingredients, you know, to fish against these teams, you know, in the World Champs, and hence the birth of my ground bait mixing, called Goldmedal Groundbaits, which I formed a small company back in the 1980s, you know, prior to me winning the World Championships, of course. But you know, does ground bait actually, and I should talk about this on the Roadshow, does ground bait actually catch fish? Or does it catch the angler? Big question, that. Yeah, when I make that statement, when you know, I firmly believe that ground bait catches more anglers than fish sometimes, because how often have you seen it, and I've seen it, an angler will smell a ground bait or open up a bag and say, that's nice. I bet that would, fish like that. But you know, the thing is, and this is where I've got to profess that I probably know a little bit more than perhaps the average angler, because my business when I first left school, I used to keep tropical fish. I used to import them. I had my own business, and I, through the endeavours of that, I learned basically how fish fed and what types of food they prefer and so forth. Different colours and I used to experiment quite a lot. One thing I learned, for example, eels. Why do we miss so many bites when we fish for eels? It's basically because an eel will pick the bait up, the maggot or the worm, in their beak, in their mouth, before they actually swallow it. And when they move, your float moves, you strike, and you miss the bite. Same when you feed the fish in. So, as I said, that was something I learned. But I also learned about various colours. Red, for example, being the most natural colour. Bloodworm, if you look at bloodworm and you look at worms, they're all dark coloured, But anyways, as I say, coming back to, does groundbait catch the fish or catch the angler? Well, a bit of both. That's my conclusion. And the reason why I say this is that, I shouldn't say this, but probably some of my best results have always come on loose feeding. And there's a reason why, why that happens. As we probably all know, I won the World Championships in Portugal, and I won it mainly using sticky maggots and gravel, which is another little method that we learned, fishing far out on the waggler. And then when we won the Welsh team actually won the World Championships in Bulgaria, we all loose fed it again there. And which brings me to a very important story, because I don't know if you're well aware, but I go to Thailand quite a bit. My lady, there she is. We got married last year, so. Anyway, when I was in Thailand, I got very friendly with an old expatriate, Billy Macon, and we discussed groundbait quite a lot. In fact, it's on one of my vlogs if you want to go back and look at it, but it was very interesting because we also come to the same conclusion about groundbait. He used to experiment, as I, many years ago, various maggots and so on, and he was telling me about a time that he had a big 6-foot tank and he put a handful of maggots in, pinkies, I should say, because he was into canal fishing quite a lot. And he put them on one end of the tank, and they all fell to the bottom. And when they fell to the bottom, one or two fish would go and pick it up, have a little eat, but the fish would come back to the middle of the tank and, be swimming around, together in like a show-up. Now, on the other end of the tank, he started dripping maggots in other words, one at a time. Now, all of a sudden, the fish responded to that far greater than they did with the food already on the bottom, which was there on a plate for them, which comes to the conclusion that fish compete for food. So basically, not only do they compete when they're visual, when the bait is actually dropping through the water, they compete with each other. And that's what it's all about. It's about the fish competing for the bait, and particularly your hook bait. So, so it begs the question, balling in with a load of groundbait on the bottom, or knobs of groundbait, or loose feed. And this is where my groundbait little bit comes into its own, because I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. But as I said, it's something that I talk about on my road shows. Now, the other question is, fish, do they smell? Now, if I can explain to you a little bit about the anatomy of a fish. The anatomy of a fish, basically, if you ever look at a fish's head, you see it's got no throat. It's basically has a throat, of course, which goes straight to the stomach. But the nose, which is the naze, is basically attached directly to the brain. So there are filters, for smelling purposes in the actual nose. And fish have got a very high sense of smell, and they can smell, a long way downstream. And I know for a fact that fish are scavengers, and that's what they look for most of the time. They look for dead, rotten, things and insects and maggots and worms and that sort of thing. Which comes me to another little story, which I'll tell to you now. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone remembers, but many years ago there was a great angler called Richard Walker. I believe he held the carp record for a while. Caught the carp in Redmere Lake in Herefordshire, and rather than kill the fish or anything, and obviously he wanted to justify the weight, they kept the fish, and rather than release it, they actually put it into the region zoo, and they called it Clarissa. It was there for a number of years. 44 pound, I think the record was then. But anyway, Dick Walker was very clever angler, a thinking angler, very scientifically as well. And I remember reading an article, I think it was in the Angling Times, about this experiment he tried with perch. When he had some perch in a tank, and he introduced a big lobworm in there. And of course, the perch looked at it, and they sort of swam around it, but they didn't eat it, didn't do anything with it. Then he thought, I wonder why. Maybe the smell. So what he done, he got another lobworm, and he cut it in half. And what he done, he introduced a couple of drops of the blood from the worm, which is the amino acids. Now you can imagine just a couple of drops in this big tank, which is millions to one particles. All of a sudden, a perch picked up. They started to eat the lobworm that was on the tank, on the bottom of the tank. So it goes to show you that basically fish do smell, and they very acute smell, and the amino acids basically gets them feeding. I suppose it's a little bit like, I don't know if you've ever gone past a burger van. Smell the enzymes, with the onions, and thinking, I like the smell. I'll have one. And when you eat it, it's not as good as the smell, but as I say, but it does get the taste buds going, and the same with fish. And as I mentioned, the anatomy of a fish, basically, through the nose straight to the brain, for the smell. Now, they haven't got no olfactory like we have. We got taste. We can taste, we can distinguish between loads of different tastes, and we know what we're eating. Well, fish, like a scavenger animal, basically is looking for something that, tasty, like an amino acid that they could eat. And that's why in a lot of the ground baits that I use a lot of amino acids, like blood, from worms and bloodworm and, natural blood. I also use a lot of aniseeds in mine, because aniseed is an amino acid that although it's a nice smelling, taste and flavour, but it's also fish like it because it resembles the amino acids in blood. And the same, with garlic. Now, garlic, which is a root vegetable or root, is very pungent, and when that's mixed with fish meal or things like that. Now, I know people talk about fish meal being very, very popular, which it is, because fish meal is almost, if you smell it, it's like dead fish, rotten fish. And a lot of the carp, commercial boys, that's all they use is pellets, because these fish are weaned on pellets when they're young, and as they grow up, that's how you catch them on, catch them on pellets and paste. So fish meal is, again, full of amino acids and biosalts as well, which is very important for the for fish. And they know if it's good for them to eat. And as I say, mixing some of these together makes a great potential ground bait. Garlic and fish meal is a good one. Aniseed and fish meal, that's one that I use quite a lot now with my pre-mixes. But I'll talk about that more now in a minute.